William M. Rice was born on March 14, 1816, in Springfield, Massachusetts, the third of 10 children born to David and Patty Rice. At 15, he began working as a grocery store clerk in Springfield, and by the age of 22, he had acquired ownership of the store. Around 1837, Rice ventured to Texas seeking new business opportunities. Initially, he worked as a bartender at the Millam House in Houston. After losing all his store's merchandise in a maritime accident, Rice was forced to start over, taking a job as a clerk in Houston. Soon after, he partnered with Ebenezer Nichols to establish Rice and Nichols, a general store. This venture laid the groundwork for what would later evolve into William M. Rice and Company. William Marsh Rice amassed his fortune through investments in land, real estate, lumber, railroads, cotton, and other ventures in Texas and Louisiana. By 1860, his wealth, which included ownership of 15 enslaved people, was valued at $750,000, making him the richest man in Houston according to the 1860 census. Rice invested heavily in Houston-based businesses, and by 1895 he was listed as a capitalist in city directories, owning the Capitol Hotel and its annex, as well as serving as president of the Houston Brickworks Company. He was also a member of the Independent Order of Oddfellows. In 1850, Rice married Margaret Bremen, the daughter of Paul Bremen, a prominent figure in the Houston and Texas Central Railway. The couple lived in Houston's Second Ward, and the 1860 census records clerks living with them, indicating that their residence may have been linked to Rice's merchant business. Margaret, who was 16 years younger than Rice, passed away in 1863 at the age of 31. During that same year, Rice reportedly lived in Matamoros, Mexico, though any connections between her death and his residence there remains unclear. By 1865, he had returned to Houston, where he served on the Harris County Slave Patrol. Rice lived in Houston until 1865, after which he moved to New York, although he did not own property there. In 1872, he built a home on a 160-acre estate in Dunnellon, New Jersey, before returning to New York in 1882. In 1867, Rice married Julia E. Brown, the sister of Charlotte Rice, who was married to Rice's brother, Frederick. Their marriage was tumultuous, and during the 1890s, Julia sought legal advice about a possible divorce. She died hopelessly insane in Waukesha, Wisconsin, on July 24, 1896. Rice was known for his eccentric habits, especially in his later years. He adopted a peculiar diet, primarily consuming bouillon and eggs, avoiding meat and most vegetables. On January 28, 1882, Rice drafted a will directing the establishment of the William M. Rice Orphans Institute, using funds from his estate. However, after meeting C. Lombardi in 1886 or 1887, Rice shifted his focus. He decided that the children of Houston, where he had built his fortune, should benefit from his wealth. In 1891, he abandoned the idea of the Orphans Institute and instead founded William M. Rice Institute for the Advancement of Literature, Science, and Art in Houston. The Institute's charter was signed by all the trustees on May 18, 1891, and certified by the state of Texas the following day. Rice also donated land to what is now the city of Rice, located between Corsicana and Ennis, Texas. William Marsh Rice was the victim of one of the most sensational crimes of the early 1900s. In 1893, he drafted a new will appointing Captain James A. Baker, his lawyer, William M. Rice, Jr., his nephew, and John D. Bartine as executors. At the time, Rice's estate was valued at approximately $4.6 million. The will instructed that his estate be divided into two parts, one half to fund the Rice Institute, and the other half to be distributed among his wife Elizabeth Baldwin Rice and other beneficiaries. After Elizabeth's death in 1896, Rice made a new will on September 26, leaving the bulk of his fortune to the Rice Institute, with smaller bequests to relatives. The next 4 years were marked by litigation over Elizabeth Rice's will. Albert T. Patrick, a former attorney from Houston working in New York, got involved in the dispute, initially trying to prove that Rice's legal residence was in Texas rather than New York, which would have benefited Mrs. Rice's estate. Patrick met with Rice under false pretenses in 1900, and, despite Rice's reluctance, their interactions continued. Patrick, seeking to take control of Rice's vast estate, forged a will naming himself as a beneficiary. In the fake will, he included bequests to several of Rice's relatives and his own friend to involve more parties in his scheme. Although the fake will still named William Rice Jr. and James Baker as executors, Patrick inserted his name in place of John Bartines. In September of 1900, William Rice was living alone at his apartment on 500 Madison Avenue in New York City, attended by his butler and valet, Charles F. Jones. On September 24th, Captain Baker received a telegram from Jones reporting that Rice had died the previous night, with a physician certifying his death as due to old age and extreme nervousness. However, another message from Rice's bankers raised suspicions about the circumstances of his death and mentioned plans to cremate his body. Rice had indeed been found dead by Jones on September 23rd, seemingly having died in his sleep. However, shortly after his death, a bank teller noticed a suspicious check made out to Rice's lawyer, Albert T. Patrick, with Patrick's name misspelled as Abbott. Patrick soon claimed that Rice had changed his will before dying, leaving the bulk of his fortune to Patrick instead of the Rice Institute. A subsequent investigation led by the New York District Attorney revealed the true plot. Jones had been persuaded by Patrick to administer chloroform to Rice while he slept, causing his death. The forged will was uncovered, and both Patrick and Jones were arrested for their involvement in the murder. Patrick was convicted of Rice's murder and sentenced to death, spending 4 years on death row at Sing Sing Prison. In 1906, his sentence was commuted by Governor Frank Higgins, and 6 years later, he was fully pardoned by Governor John A. Dix. Patrick passed away in 1940 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at the age of 74. Charles Jones, though involved in the plot, was granted his freedom but lived in seclusion. He died by suicide on November 16, 1954, at the age of 79 in Baytown, Texas. Rice's body was eventually cremated, and his ashes were kept in the vault of the Rice Institute's business office until they were placed beneath a monument erected in his memory on the university's campus. Hooper Young was born in Salt Lake City, Utah Territory, and was the son of John Willard Young, an apostle in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was also the grandson of Brigham Young, the president of the LDS Church and founder of Salt Lake City. In his early adulthood, Hooper Young became an elder in the LDS Church and served as a missionary in the eastern United States in 1891 and 1892. However, by 1893, he left Salt Lake City and began drifting from place to place, taking up various jobs. His travels took him to cities like Seattle, San Francisco, Portland, Chicago, New York City, Washington, D.C., and Hoboken, New Jersey. Over time, Young distanced himself from the LDS Church, and according to his relatives, he became addicted to morphine. There were even rumors that he had fled Salt Lake City after being involved in a killing. On September 19, 1902, the body of Anna Pulitzer was discovered in the Morris Canal near Jersey City, New Jersey. She had been stabbed in the abdomen, and her head showed signs of bruising. Pulitzer, though married, had been arrested multiple times for soliciting prostitution. A New York City cab driver came forward, claiming that a few days earlier he had driven Pulitzer and an unidentified man to an apartment in New York City, which was owned by John Willard Young, Hooper Young's father. When the police searched the apartment, they found several incriminating items, including empty beer bottles, a bottle containing chloral hydrate crystals, a blood-stained carving knife, and blood on the bed sheets, in a closet, under the kitchen sink, and on the floor and walls. In addition, the words blood atonement were scrawled in a notebook, along with several references to Bible verses about atonement for crime. An investigation revealed that Pulitzer had died from a drug overdose, caused by chloral poisoning, with the bruising on her head and the stabbing to her abdomen inflicted post-mortem. It was soon revealed that John Willard Young had been in France at the time of Anna Pulitzer's disappearance. However, his son, Hooper Young, had been using the apartment in his absence. Hooper Young was arrested in Derby, Connecticut, where he was found intoxicated and dressed like a vagrant. Initially, he denied his identity, but later admitted to who he was. Young claimed that on the night of Pulitzer's death, he, Pulitzer, and a third person named Charles Simpson Eiling had been in the apartment. He stated that when he left briefly to buy whiskey, he returned to find Pulitzer dead. According to Young, Eiling had murdered her, and fearing public scandal that could disgrace his father, he decided to help conceal the body. He confessed that he attempted to dismember Pulitzer's body, but after making a cut to her abdomen, he lost the courage to continue. Though he did not confess to dumping her body in the canal, he implied that he knew what had happened to it. Despite a search for Charles Eiling, no one by that name could be found. When New York newspapers learned that the prime suspect in Anna Pulitzer's murder was Brigham Young's grandson, widespread speculation arose regarding the motive. Some suggested that the reference to blood atonement found in the apartment hinted at the connection to the Mormon doctrine, where an individual atones for their sins through the shedding of their own blood. Others speculated that Hooper Young and Pulitzer had previously been involved in an illicit affair dating back to Young's time as a Mormon missionary in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, Pulitzer's hometown. Despite rumors, the true motive for the murder was never established. Hooper Young's murder trial began in New York City on February 4, 1903, where he pleaded not guilty. As the trial progressed, on February 10th, Young agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder. The judge accepted his plea and sentenced him to life in prison with hard labor. The judge explained that he chose not to impose the death penalty because medical experts believed that while Young was not legally insane, he was likely suffering from a medical condition affecting his mental state. Since the trial was not fully completed, the court never thoroughly investigated Young's motive or his claim of another man's involvement. Young served his life sentence at Sing Sing Prison in Ossining, New York. His sentence was 0 to 15 years, and he was also known as William Hooper Young. His description noted that he was a white male, approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, with a slender build, florid complexion, brown eyes, and balding gray hair. Hooper Young died at Folsom Prison on December 6, 1939, at the age of 68.